bodies don't decompose as normal in this Colombian town, and nobody knows why. Dun, dun, dun. Cue the dramatic music, right? Pretty wild stuff as we begin. And this is a strange one. So before we begin this journey tonight, think about those mummification rituals of the old days, and think about what it looks like in, let's say, the modern times. Specifically, that the Egyptian mummification bit was, it was for elite people, it was for pharaohs, it was for the rich folks, right? And even sort of beyond that, it was a way to maybe help them live forever, help them achieve whatever it is, to kind of move into the afterlife comfortably, right? With their spirit boats or whatever the hell's going on, right? And again, I say that because we're going to talk about Charon the Boatman tonight, which is going back to good old ancient Greek and Roman mythology, which is one of my favorites. But so right here, straight from the article, which is absolutely wild. Listen to this. This is one that will make you scratch your head. In a small town high in the Colombian Andes, Clovis Neris Bejarno, I probably pronounced that right, kneels before a glass box holding the petrified corpse of her mother, who died 30 years ago, but looks as if she might just be asleep. Saturnina Torres de Bejarano is dressed in the same rose print dress and green woolen jersey she was interred in, clasping a fake red carnation in her eerily well-preserved hands. Quote, "She still has her little brown face, round, her braids, her hair," Bejarno, age 63, told AFP at her mother's final resting place in a museum displaying her body and those of 13 others from the town of San Bernardo. Is how you say that, Bernardo. Straight in the article, you can find that links in the description down below. So these 13 others became spontaneously and mysteriously mummified after death. And so, quote, "If God wanted to preserve her, it must be for a reason," said Bejarno, a resident of the town, some 100 kilometers or 62 miles south of Bogota, that would be Colombia, right? So Torres was interred in a vault in the San Bernardo Municipal Cemetery in 1993. She was exhumed in 2001, as is customary to make space for new bodies, and her relatives found her still with hair, nails, and much of her tissue unspoiled. Weird, right? And so it came as no major surprise, because dozens of mummified bodies have come out of the vaults since the first one in 1963. Quote, "When all this began, people were a little incredulous about what was happening. They thought these were going to be isolated events," said museum guide Rosia Vergara. "As time went on, it became more and more frequent to find bodies in this condition," she told AFP. All right. So which, again, when you're thinking about mummification rituals of the old ways, and as I was describing before I interrupted myself so rudely, think about not just helping our ancestors cross over into a better place, sort of in the Egyptian mummification style rituals, but also think about preservation of the tissue itself for a more modern style of resurrection, which would be sort of a DNA cloning aspect, if we're able to keep intact DNA of these entities from, antiquity, which again is wild. We've talked about that in the past quite a lot. And it is one of those things that it kind of circles back when you kind of look at these weirdo elites or sickos that are collecting ancient DNA for who knows what purposes, okay? And in many cases, it's, they say ancestry type stuff or whatever else. But then there's been, some wild articles and speculation that they're trying to actually clone their ancestors that are, powerful in some way, in one way or another. So anyway, so as we get into this tonight, think about what the mummification ritual of the ancient Egyptians was about. Now, was it about something more specific to sort of helping them cross over into the afterlife, specifically the soul? And again, just for the sake of conversation, just believe in the soul tonight, whether you do or not. It's all fine. Like I said, no truth to be found here, just a philosophical construct. So helping the soul pass on from our realm to the next, okay, whatever that means to you, or not. Just again, it is the mark of an educated mind to consider a thought without accepting it, or, it's a bad paraphrase from Aristotle, but we're just drinking the maybe juice, okay? So think about that. But then also, what about sort of the same aspect of the ancient Egyptians that didn't really recognize in the larger sense here that they were preserving directly the DNA of the pharaohs, which in the old days they believed were gods of some sort. Gods become flesh. So in some sense, they've preserved the DNA of ancient gods. Okay. Now, again, how spooky, how creepy does that get? Like I said, you got to squint a little bit and use your imagination here, but there's some parallels to some pretty bizarre things happening. Now, if the Egyptians went through all this like ridiculous ritual and taking all the time to figure out what it took to mummify individuals, and again, no, don't interrupt yourself, Mike. I just finished the thought. So if they took all the time to do this and we're able to possibly bring the entities into the future with this, again, whether it's technological DNA or whether it's helping entities pass on from another realm, right? This type of stuff. There's that. But then the other part becomes, what if everybody was able to be mummified in this manner and not just the elites? And what is happening to the soul in that process? Is it a delayed manifestation of the soul crossing? Things like this. Here's where the maybe juice comes in. And so what would happen to a soul? Okay, keep this on your mind as we go. What happens to a soul that is mummified? And, we've talked about this recently as the moment people pass is ambiguous, meaning that we don't know exactly when consciousness sort of clicks off. We used to think we knew, but new science suggests that it's more and more creepy than you would ever imagine, at least in that sense, right? Of people being conscious or semi-conscious long after they've flatlined on a modern medical table. Okay, so lots of wild stuff to consider this. But once again, so think about this. Once you are mummified in an ancient mummification ritual as a living flesh and blood god, all right, what happens to your soul? Is it delayed somehow? Is it waiting for the boatman? Is it actually just a flesh and blood ritual to keep the DNA fresh for thousands of years for that eventual resurrection of the cloning, which is bound to happen? We're cloning sheep now, right? I'm sure somebody's tried to clone a human somewhere. Of course, we're told not to think about that, or we're told not to talk about that, or right. But you gotta guess some sicko out there has been trying to do this for quite some time. The second they were able to clone Dolly the sheep, they're like, ooh, I wonder if we could clone Genghis Khan. Let's find his tomb, right? This type of stuff, because there's some sickos out there that want to, well, I don't know. You decide on what the motivation is. But anyway, so the question for tonight is specifically this. What happens to the soul when we're talking about this actual, the manifestation of a mummification ritual and what it does to the soul itself? Is it a delay? Or is it more of a flesh and blood thing? And how creepy does this get when we have this particular town in Colombia where these mummifications are happening just as a current random state of affairs? Not random, it's becoming ubiquitous in this particular space. So I got a lot of wild ideas on what may be happening here. And again, massive maybe juice, massive caution, no truth to be found here, just ideas. Now, the wild part is this. Let me read you just the top blurb from the write-up here. This is also linked in the description. I encourage you to read these write-ups in full. They are very good typically, and they are, again, outlined and written with AI in the style of Michael Strange. So I've taught it to write like me, and so bam, talk about massive shorthand, AI shorthand. But here we go. So in a remote mountain town, a scientific anomaly is turned into something out of a nightmare. Bodies left alone don't decompose, but mummify with disturbing speed. Their flesh leathery and desiccated even under normal conditions. And of course, experts are baffled. The townsfolk are terrified, and some, a fringe few whispering in the shadows, see something else entirely. A sign of shifts happening beneath the surface of our reality. Now, it brings to mind many things that we've talked about recently in the past week, okay? Specifically, one of them is the idea that there are different places that are, I don't know, genius loci, as we've talked about recently, or these different places where they affect not just, let's say, the soul or the entity of the body of the person, the rest of this stuff, but more beyond that, there's something happening in particular parts of the world that is anomalous, okay? And not just that in terms of what it means to not just live, but in this case, also to die. And weirdness ensues when you start to think of how weird this gets, because here's one that I thought, and here we'll kick off the maybe juice with this idea, all right? Now, what if in this particular place, once you pass on, all right, we're talking about this small town in Colombia where these corpses just become mummies, not instantly, but they don't decompose as you would expect. And look, the basic scientific stuff is that it's super dry, things like this, okay? But I mean, think back to ancient Egypt. Think about the Egypt now. It's super dry. I mean, there's a lot of places that kind of stick here, a lot of parallels in Colombia, modern day, in this mountain town we're talking about, and also ancient Egypt. Okay, so it's not too far ridiculous to say that it might be sort of a weather thing, but also maybe not. Maybe elevation comes into play. Who knows? So they're looking into this as the scientific inquiry is to find why there may be less moisture in the, not just in the ground but in the air. They're looking into this, so they don't really know just yet. But again, good enough for me to kind of take the idea and talk about mummification rituals and what it would be like for the soul itself. Is it possible to delay it? Now, to delay sort of the passage, and maybe the soul sticks in the place of where the DNA still resides until a final doom sort of becomes whatever it becomes. You know what I mean? I'm rambling badly here. But, okay, so here's the weird part. Here's the maybe juice part where I was like, okay, so what if when you pass on in this particular place, there's a time dilation effect? There's something to the effect of like a wrinkle in time. And suddenly, where these corpses should be decaying super quickly, as they are wont to do when people pass on and don't get, quote, processed properly. Shout out Joe in Florida, processed in that, passing on state sense, modern, what is it, funeral rituals in the modern day. But I mean, I don't know. That's one way. That's one way to look at this. Maybe possibly a sort of wrinkle, like a wrinkle in time of such, or a passage of time once you pass. But anyway, how does that affect the soul? Anyway, lots of wild ideas here. But let's see. All right. So it got me thinking in a lot of ways. Okay, not just in terms of, let's say, the soul passing on, but maybe waiting on Charon the boatman. And we've talked about this guy quite a lot in the past. A psychopomp is what he's known as, which is an actual spirit that's supposed to be, his entire role is to help souls cross over from this realm to the next. And Charon the boatman, of course, is one of those ones where you see that there's a tradition that still exists in some places in the world, and you see this in movies quite a lot, where they put the coins over the eyes of somebody who's deceased, or they put a coin in their mouth. Okay, and what that was supposed to represent is passage to pay Charon the boatman when he comes to pick up your soul and take it into the next realm. So you have some sort of payment to give to him, okay? Because, of course, Charon the boatman, the celestial psychopomp, is still dealing in, good old-fashioned gold or whatever, right? Silver or gold. Because, I mean, I guess maybe alchemically that makes some sense if you're being super weird. But anyway, so just a real quick refresher on that. So Charon is a figure from Greek mythology where he is a boatman who ferries the souls of the dead across the waters of Hades to the judgment which will determine their final resting place. The Greeks believed the dead needed a coin to pay Charon for his service, and so one was placed in the mouth of the deceased, as I said there. Charon was a popular subject in the 4th and 5th century BCE Greek pottery scenes, especially the lakaithoi, I think is how you say it, used to store fine oils and perfumes, which were commonly buried with the dead. Karu was a similar figure in Etruscan mythology, although he often carries a hammer. Anyway, so we got some these psychopomps. We did a whole show on this particular idea of these entities that are there to help people cross over, help the human soul move over into the next realm. All right. Well, so what happens when you're talking about mummification rituals and maybe the delay there? Think about it this way. What about the Beetlejuice subway or something to that effect, right? When you pass on, you sit there, you queue up, you wait in line. You've got your gold in your mouth or whatever, right? Of course, spit out in the Beetlejuice effect of sitting there with your soul. I don't think you're going to have your soul chilling with a piece of gold in your mouth. You're going to probably exchange it to your hand, but you get the idea, because it just seems uncomfortable to have a piece of gold in your mouth. But you're chilling and you're waiting for the subway to come. You're waiting for the train. You're waiting for the boatman. You're waiting for the passage. Okay. But I wonder if we talked about this in the past, if it wasn't, it's not directly always on time. And maybe you wait, and maybe you wait, and maybe you wait, and maybe it's a very long time. And what if that can be delayed or changed or whatever by these actual mummification rituals. And the passage of the soul actually doesn't end until the DNA, that your source code in this realm, becomes completely and irreversibly destroyed. Okay, so you see what I mean. So in that same sense, we're talking about human source code as a construct, a metaphysical construct that binds us to this realm. And as long as there's a way to bring you back, even cloning wise, which we talked about a little bit earlier there, is that maybe, just maybe, we're slowing down this process, and the wait in the Beetlejuice ritual aspect is going to be longer. And maybe those poor pharaohs that we got, poor King Tut in the museum there, has been waiting for thousands of years to actually cross over because they've mummified him so well. So that becomes a lot of things when you look at the sort of the temporal wrinkle idea, or the psychopomp kind of waiting, making you wait because you're not there yet. You haven't actually reached the point of no return. And, you're still sort of in limbo or in stasis or something. I don't know. A lot of ways to look at this and consider it in terms of what this might mean. But the mystery remains, back to where we started tonight. So the bodies don't decompose as normal in this Colombian town. Link is in the description. I encourage you to read it. Pretty wild stuff. But why, though? Why? And again, metaphysically, what does it mean for the human soul? And of course, for the sake of the conversation, as I said, as I always say, no truth to be found here, but for the sake of the conversation tonight, to enrich it a little bit deeper and make you enjoy yourself a little bit more, you got to believe in the human soul for just a moment. Tonight, okay? What's up? Yeah, Matt Zell says, take a number. Indeed, take a number. Yeah, so that's what's on my mind tonight. A lot of ways to look at this, and a lot of really bizarre things in terms of what this means. And I'm still confounding myself because I should have called this like a wrinkle in time or something. But anyway, the name of this is In the Shadow of the Ferryman and Lost Souls of the Mountain, which probably makes a little more sense now that you've heard a little bit of this. But I still feel like a wrinkle in time, or a village outside of time, or I don't know, like time, like a time dilation effect. I don't know. It kind of feels like a temporal situation here that well, maybe I'll change the name. You obsess on these details when you try and make everything as good as possible, and you're just like, damn it, I ran out of time, and I really wanted a better title. Anyway, so that's what's on my mind tonight. And so a lot of ideas as we begin. And so number one, what do you think is happening with the specific the mummification that's happening in this particular place, in this Colombian town? Again, a mountain town. It doesn't seem to be something that's rare. It's quite common that they're becoming mummified, very much like the ancient Egyptians, that they took all that time and care to keep their DNA intact for eternity, okay? Till the time where we have actual cloning technology in the DNA realm, in the DNA sense of science, okay? Well, so now what happens when the entire town in perpetuity has, dare we say, eternal DNA? Is there a thing here? Is there a connection? And is it maybe connected to the human soul in a lot of ways? And what about the temporal wrinkle and that sort of waiting on the subway for Khan the Boatman, who has now been delayed because your actual final existence from this realm has not yet been extinguished because you've been mummified. You've been preserved in some way for a future time when they might wake you up like something out of Vanilla Sky, if you've ever seen that movie, something like that. Anyway, a lot of weird things here to consider tonight, and I've got some more wild ideas too, which are probably way too far out there to get into right off the bat, or you guys will all think I'm insane. So let's not go too far off the rocker to start. But that's what's on my mind tonight. So what do you know about this, the weird mummification stuff? What would be your guess scientifically what's happening? And two, metaphysically, what's happening with the soul if you ever, even though you've passed and your consciousness has sort of lapsed or become inert, what about your DNA still in this realm? Do you think it is some sort of blocker or some sort of purgatory aspect to the human soul actually moving on, which would explain in many ways that old Egyptian ritual of the mummification process of their living flesh and blood gods of the days of old, the days of yore, as I always say. So I don't know, that probably puts us about exactly where we need to be, looking at the clock, trying to stay on the radio timer as much as possible, because hey, a pro is pro. So that's what's on my mind tonight. I hope you guys are doing well. Looking to hear your thoughts. As always, we're taking your phone calls at 702-957-1037. That's 702-957-1037. Click the Discord link at troubledminds.org. We'll put you on the show. It's as easy as that. Talking about In the Shadow of the Ferryman. That's right. The psychopomp